Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. I'm your host, Kiley Carlson. This podcast is where we talk about how successful business leaders win, not only at work, but also at home. On this podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with great leaders to hear stories of how they win. Thank you for listening, and on to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey. You're listening to Win at Home First podcast. Today is a special episode because I am interviewing my daughter, Kiley Carlson, who is 16, actually will be 17 years old tomorrow. So, Kiley, welcome to the episode.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
That's great. So the whole reason I'm doing this, taking a risk of having Kiley on there and going kind of different from what I usually do of having business leaders on the podcast, is to actually invite Kiley in to hear the good, the bad, the ugly of kind of winning at home first and how I parent, what I'm doing right. This is not, the intent of this is not to be a flattery session of how, amazing of a dad I am, or Holly, my wife, Kiley's mom, how amazing of parents we are. But instead it's to say, hey, what has worked in our raising of three kids, who Kiley will be 17 tomorrow. We have a 13-year-old Camden, and then Caleb is 8, soon to be 9. And so what has worked, but also what has not worked. I can be a pretty intense dad. I understand that, whether it's trying to drive home coaching principles, trying to drive home spiritual growth. I get it. I can be pretty hard at times, but I also know we can have some fun. So the intent of this whole podcast is to bring value to the listener, hearing from a teenager of what works, what doesn't work, and hopefully it'll help all of you lead maybe better than what I did. So Kiley, to kick things off, what is the key trait that a teenager needs to have to win at home first?
I think this goes both ways for the kid and the parent, but just like understanding patience, because they are not going to be, right 100% time, both the parent and the kid, that goes for. But for the teenager, they have this sense of like, I need to be, or like, oh man, my parents, like they just never see my side and all this, but you have to understand that they have a different perspective. So I believe that it's just like the patience and the perspectives they need to understand.
How does a parent understand perspective better? What are things that we can do, questions we can ask? How do we get better perspective of a teenager?
Well, it's also just understanding like the fact that, yeah, you were a teenager once. That's a very common phrase said by parents. But at the same time, it's a different era of teenagers and a completely different, like you guys, for my case, like my parents didn't have technology at their hands all the time. They didn't have Snapchat, Instagram, all of those different platforms. So what they see, they see a different perspective on those platforms. But when, for me, like I use those to connect with my friends, to connect with people. And it's not just like technology, like, negative. Yes, there can be negative effects of technology in like social media for sure. And that's like a whole different conversation. But like the positive, that's a part of it that needs to be seen from the parents. And then I believe like questions, I think it's just kind of, how can I better understand? Like just ask questions. Don't say like, stop doing this. Just say, why is this a part of your rhythm? Like there's just a difference between that negative. And that's not what I did, more than kind of like, why is this a new thing? Like what's the draw?
So what are some of your favorite rhythms that we do as a family?
Family wise, I love that we really make it intentional to like have those family dinners. I'll be around a lot of different friends, families and stuff. And some of them don't have that rhythm. They'll kind of just eat at their own time. And while that's still cool and it works for them, I just love the fact that we have that time at the end of the day just to come together all at the table and like just kind of debrief from like the day and like share the fun stuff, and you do this thing. It's really cool. I may not show appreciation for it all the time, but it is cool to hear everyone's different like stories of their day. My dad will say, all right, what was your high and low for the day? And basically kind of have to explain, why is that high? Why is that a low? And so normally, you're eating dinner like, okay, this is not the right moment, but it actually is a cool conversation starter for the family then you learn things that you didn't know before because you haven't seen them.
I'm so glad this is recorded because now I know you like it. I'll play it for you because a lot of times you guys all roll your eyes when I do it. So it's good to know. There are teenagers that are out there, and I know you've been there at times where you don't want to do the family dinner. Like you'd rather just skip it. Why do you attend those family dinners and when you could go out with friends?
I actually just like family time. Like I like I feel like this is a house and I'm very blessed because this house is like a safe spot for me. So being like with the family does not bother me. And like tomorrow for my birthday, we're going to Top Golf as a family and I couldn't be more excited. Yeah. I am hanging out with friends in the day, but for that night, I just want to be with my family and just like celebrate just us five. And I think that's definitely a special part of our family and our rhythm. And I hope and I am like praying that more teens can experience that because it is just like this feeling of because you know that these people will be there for you all the time. So those family dinners, like those are non-negotiable. We've just kind of unintentionally decided as a family to make that non-negotiable. And that's a rhythm I hope to keep.
So not every family enjoys hanging out with each other. That's just a reality. But there are family values that all families have, whether they're announced or not announced. And for us, what are those family values that you see us live in, day out, that make us a draw, that you want to spend time with us?
Yeah, I think a big one is how open we are with each other. We don't hold things in and like just go up to our rooms and, anger, like keep the anger inside. We'll go down and be like, listen, I don't like how you do this part. For me and my dad have already discussed it. It was kind of like, I don't like how it's kind of feels like this is a way long time ago, but it was kind of like he was pressuring faith on me and I wanted to experience it for myself. And it was an open conversation and it worked so well because we had that foundation already built from, just kind of those little baby steps of that openness. And he understood. And it's been so great because I've been able to experience faith on my own and like understand what it means to be a follower of Jesus by myself without that, pressure. And so I feel that's a huge one because we've all done that in our family where we're like, can we work on this so that we can grow stronger and not start to go into our rooms and be in there and just hold that anger inside and then slowly build that resentment up.
So how do you encourage a parent and child or a father and daughter to be open? Because I know a lot of my buddies and clients and friends who listen to this, they, like me, are trying to push spiritual onto their kids. They want to raise them right. I mean, how do we communicate spiritual to you or anything? That whole open piece you just talked about.
It's also a huge part of being like dependent versus independent. You don't want them to grow up and be dependent on you for their faith. But at the same time, you want them to be like their own follower, not just following you follow.
Mm-hmm.
But how to do that, it honestly varies for each relationship. That open communication, you just kind of have to start it. Like you can't just, there's not a step process. It's more just kind of like you have to have that first conversation. Maybe it's just going to coffee and being like, the parent asking, okay, what am I doing that makes you feel pressured? Or like, what am I doing that is pulling you away from God? And then it's just the kid opening up. It has to happen naturally and kind of forced, but if it's not happening already, there has to be that kind of instigator.
I remember asking all three of you kids on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the best, what am I as a father? And, the ranking didn't really matter because my next question is really all that mattered was, whatever you say. If you say 7, then I'm going to say, all right, great. What's going to take it to get me to a 10? And I remember Camden and Caleb both saying, don't talk faith, coaching, or any deep stuff before noon, which I obey that sometimes, and sometimes I still do it early. But I think that's just it, is being in, you and I had a whole different conversation around that about me not pressuring, but instead inviting you into a spiritual journey. So what has been most impactful to you in your faith journey?
2 things come to mind. First one is my trip to Nicaragua with my dad, actually. And that one was just more, I've never been out of the country until then. And I had never, it was so many firsts. Never climbed a volcano, never built a bathroom. Like all these firsts kind of just, it was a huge milestone for just, just for me, like as a person, like completely stepping out of my comfort zone from the flight. Because I remember shaking. Like I remember getting so excited, but then when I got to the flight and I was in the line and I literally was shaking. I've never been like that nervous. And my dad was like, what is going on? Like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm shaking. I'm so scared. No, that was a brief second because then the whole time we were laughing, smiling, and in the end there were even tears. So, but anyways, moral of the story is climbing that volcano and getting to the top and seeing that, like, I've never seen that much greenery, but yet there was just like the volcano yet was so like, it was black. It's so hard to explain, but that was such a spiritual awakening just because I was like, this is crazy that God built this all and we are here and we get to enjoy it. And then that whole Genesis talk of kind of, he built this and he just said it was good. Like he was, this is good, but I'm not pleased with everything yet. And then he built us and he was like, this is very good. And then you're like, you see it and yeah, you're like, that's cool. And then you see it in person and it just is mind blowing that he thinks that you're better than that. So I think that was number one. The second one is I started tithing again because I have paychecks now with my job. So instead of just like cash coming in from babysitting and like putting in different like piles, I had to figure out and just realign myself because I was not tithing. It was not like I didn't want to tithe. I just hadn't thought about it because I wasn't putting them in piles. It was just all going into one bank account. So I got on, to Crossroads and started tithing to them. And it's been a monthly recurrence. And then right after I did that, I had a meeting with my bosses at work. And they said that they would really like to promote me, with more time and stuff because I wasn't putting in that much hours. But it was so bizarre. And I was like, there was no coincidence because that was so, it was like I was told to tithe. Like I felt the need to tithe. And the next day I go in and I get that amazing, evaluation report. So it was really cool. And I feel like those are my two big ones that I keep bringing up every time I'm asked that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're amazing stories. And I've heard it said before, and what my prayer for all three of you kids is that you are independently dependent on God. And both those stories are your own, dependence on God, where you could have taken that money. And we had lots of conversations about what to do with the money, but understand, hey, it's a 10% tithing. And then we put a percentage in savings and then the rest is spend. And yeah, you had some pushback and all the things that you wanted to buy. I mean, you're a teenage girl. It's clothes, it's iPhones, it's Apple computers, it's coffees. I mean, it's all these different things that you want to buy, but you made that sacrifice, which is cool. Mm-hmm. So, and then right away you got a promotion. Not that right when you tithe, you get a promotion. It's not a guarantee, but so often we see as we are obedient, then we receive numerous blessings. So I love that that's your story. Mm-hmm. It's so cool. One story in Nicaragua that I know is crazy impactful to you and has changed you a lot. And that was when you got to give the sandals to the mom of the family we were serving.
Before going, and I still have those tendencies now, I have very much a scarcity mindset. I like to keep what I have. And there's not a lot of, I'll share stuff, but it's very hard for me to let go of, which is embarrassing to admit to say out loud, but I know it's not just my struggle. Anyways, going into Nicaragua, we met this little boy at the family we were building the bathroom for, and I adored him. Like he is this little 6-year-old, and he was just playing soccer. We just got along. Yeah, we didn't speak the same language, but he loved my camera. He loved getting pictures taken of him. So we built this like little relationship kind of, and this friendship for these like 3 days that I got to see him. And then we were giving gifts to the family the last day. And we got him kind of the most just because he was the youngest, kind of the more involved with all the volunteers. And so we got him flip-flops, we got him bubbles, a new soccer ball because he's, tired. And then we got his mom and his brother flip-flops as well, just because, we wanted to give them something as well because they are still very valuable and very important in this family. But I really, really wanted to go and give the little boy his stuff. Like that was like I was so excited, and I got the bag, and I'm like, I'm going to see his little face when he does it. And I ended up not being the one to give his stuff, which again, totally fine with. I got to see it from afar, but I was like, okay, well, I'm going to just give the mom her sandals. I wanted to give something. And this a backstory on the mom, she was this very quiet, very humble person, because that I still like look up to now, and I'll be like the mom in Nicaragua, which is funny that this woman that I had no words exchange with, except for one, but like no words. We didn't speak the same language. And she taught us how to make food and stuff. There was no verbal communication to build this friendship off of. But every time we were building or mixing concrete, she was the one who was helping. Like she would help. She didn't let anything happen as a gift to her. She was in there digging the ditches and stuff. And it was crazy to watch. I was like, this is a gift for your family. Like, take it in. Take this time to rest. She was always the last to eat. She fed everyone first, even all the volunteers. And then she ate whatever was like left. And that just watching her on the daily, honestly, was not like my focal point at the moment. But now it's crazy when I like look back on it. I'm focusing on what she was doing because I was playing with her kid, and like her other kid was helping, but she was just she was not sitting down. And so fast forward to when I give her flip-flops, and then her face just lights up. Like it was so crazy. There was more than like just her eyes widening. It was like a glow around her. And all she says, and you can kind of see her teared up, which makes me want to cry. And all she does, she hugs me and she just says, gracias. Like that's all, because I think she knew like that's the only words I knew. But it was eye-opening just to see how much like a gift, a small token of appreciation, of flip-flops could do for someone. It looked honestly as that was the first gift she'd ever just received. Like she wasn't expecting anything, even though she was just getting a bathroom book, but she took those flip-flops like, oh my gosh, this is for me. This is like mine this time. And so from that moment on, I've just really tried to live my life like that. Just kind of, none of this is mine. It's all a gift to me. Yeah, I work hard for the money I get at my job, but it's not mine. Like it's in my bank account, but it's still God's. So I'm trying to use that as fuel to not become in that scarcity mindset anymore.
Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you are enjoying it so far. Before we go back to the rest of this episode, I wanted to share with you my book, Win at Home First. Some of you have read it, so thank you very much. For others of you, you have not. And I encourage, if you're looking for a resource to help you with these times of your work is now in your home and your home is now in your work and what this looks like, this book is being helpful to many leaders like you. Forbes magazine said it was one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. And the book is broken up into 4 different sections to help you. First is about you, understand who you are. The second is marriage and ideas and tips to help with your marriage. Third is parenting. And the last is work. So these 4 different sections to help you recalibrate during this time and to help move forward. So if you are needing additional resources, I encourage you to check out my book, Win at Home First. It is available on Amazon as well as Audible. And so on to the rest of the episode. Thank you very much. One thing that you do that I think is really cool is you do that mood coloring chart up in your room where you color code each day based on your feelings, your emotions. And that's a little bit of you take note of your own days. And most of your days are good. I think that's the pink color.
Yeah.
But you do have some bad days, as we all do. But why did you start tracking your moods?
The kind of not so wisdom-based answer is I saw it on Pinterest. But I saw it, and obviously there was something I was like, that is so cool. I should start doing it. And it was it's not just like, oh, I have to do this. It kind of became that at a moment. And then I had to just like regroup because it was kind of like, oh, I have to do this every day. Like I have to make sure I do this at the end of the day. It's actually very freeing just to do that, because then you see in the grand scheme of things how your month has been, how your few months, how your year has been. And I keep those. I'm on my third one now. And so I did it since 2019. And I have them like 2019, 2020 in there in my like little keepsake box. And it's so funny because I like look back at those and I'm like, I remember exactly what that day was. Or like, I don't know why, honestly, like the exact reason I started it, but I'm very happy I did. And I know why I have continued it. It's just because it's fun to regroup at the end of the day and be like, that happened. Yes, that happened. But what was my overall feeling on this day?
And so you've gone back and you've looked at them
Mm-hmm.
and reflected on them?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. I did not know that. But over those last 3 years, it's crazy. You're also in your third year, that you've had some cruddy moments along the way. I mean, your whole junior year was virtual and our third floor.
Mm-hmm.
You've obviously had, I mean, like every teenager, there's been friend drama. There's been ups and downs and boys and grades and whatever it is.
Yeah.
We've had some ups and downs in this house.
Mm-hmm.
But what's impressive to see is when you look at the grand scheme of things, like you said, yes, there were some, what's the bad color day? Was that yellow?
That yellow is something like unexpected or amazing happened.
Oh, that yellow's a great color.
Yellow's a great color.
Okay.
The bad color is red. That's a sad day.
Red. So red, and there's some red on there.
Mm-hmm.
And in the thick of it, you probably feel when you're in the red, you're never getting out of the red.
Mm-hmm.
You're here for life. But when you can zoom out and actually see, especially the 3-year landscape, there are reds on those 3 different pieces of paper. But man, there are more yellows and even more pinks, which is great. Mm-hmm. That's so cool to see. And I mean, even just as I talk about it, it's like, I kind of wish I had a color chart because I could then see that, yes, there's been months of low revenue for the business, or there's been stresses in family or stresses wherever, but man, the grand scheme of things, it's been pretty darn good.
Right.
How do you live out your faith in a day-to-day basis? You go to a public school, and how do you do it?
I think it's just my presence that I really try to make sure I keep that positive attitude. Yes, I'll like, let's say I get a bad grade on a test or something, that positive attitude does kind of deflate a little bit. But it's also just being that light for other people. With my friend group, I have so many different stories of this, but I have a lot of friends who like come up to me and like they'll know I'm a Christian. They know I have basically like a pastor as my father, but that's not their like reason for asking me. I think they honestly, genuinely, like they want my feedback. So I had a friend ask me questions about parts of the Bible that they didn't understand. And I didn't even know she was reading the Bible. So it was very eye-opening for her to even just come up to me and ask me that. So I sat down with her and I like told her my views on it. And I definitely did like get nervous because I'm like, I feel like I'm not qualified to say this because I'm the same age as her. And I asked my dad questions. I think I remember texting him a few times, like, do you know the answer to this? Because I don't. But I just love the fact that I have built this foundation of being the light for my friends and being honestly what the disciple is supposed to be. Just being someone there that people can count on to ask questions and to be like, she's a follower. How do I grow in my faith? So I think that positive, being the light.
That's helpful to teenagers that listen to this. It's also helpful to all of us adults in the workplace, in the corporate environment, because some people, they don't know how to talk about the gospel. But everything you just said, because I know you're not, just because of schedule and dance competitions, you can't be crazy involved in a lot of the different Christian organizations just because of schedule conflicts. So it's not like you're, carrying the flag of some of those organizations. But instead of, speaking the gospel, you are living the gospel. You are doing what you can to live like Jesus, which is so cool. And that is what the draw is. And I think that for anybody listening who in that corporate work setting or is a student in the school is just be. Just be the gospel. And from that can attract people. So Kiley, what do you wish I would have done differently in your teenage years?
Oh, wow. Okay. We talked about this earlier, the, pressuring, but that that's one thing I'm happy happened because it allowed us to talk about it and, find something that works for us.
So how does a parent teach them the importance of discipline and the importance of faith and spending time in the word, and maybe you still don't do all those things the way I would want them done or to the quantity I'd want them done, and that's where I have to have grace that you're not going to be reading the Bible every day, you don't have every single Bible verse memorized and all these different pieces. That's where I have to have grace. But on that pressuring piece, there's got to be a point where we can apply pressure.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you never would have seen the need to tithe. You never would have had that desire to go to Nicaragua or to even be bold in the study hall or cafeteria to talk to other people. So there is this tension between just freedom, free will, go do what you want, versus having some pressure, right? We talk about invitation versus challenge, inviting into a relationship, but also challenge and responsibility. So how does a parent out there, as they're listening, say, okay, I've got to do both? How does that work for a teenager?
Some kids require more pressuring than others. Like they won't do it unless they are specifically told how to and step-by-step instructions. On the other hand, there are kids that are like, just tell me what it is and I'll do it. I can do it on my own time and I'll get it done. For parents and kids listening out there, you just have to know your kid and know yourself and be like, listen, let's sit down and figure out what do you like and how can I get this across to you, but without pushing you away.
So when I have pushed you away, when it's not worked out, that's usually when I'm coming high challenge. Back to your very beginning, I'm not asking questions. I'm not asking your perspective. I'm just trying to drive the hammer.
And it's also just we're very similar. So it's kind of like, okay, all you're doing is telling me what to do. And I need to be independent and figure this out for myself. Yeah, high invitation, high challenge. I think we are more on the side of, I guess we could say we're in the middle, but leaning towards more invitation just for our, me and your relationship. But for Camden, it would be more high challenge or closer to the challenge and less invitation just because of how we're wired. That's the beauty of us three different kids. And I think that's probably harder for you because we're all different. So it's kind of trying to figure out the balance is not the same across all three. But so for us, we're more invitation just because we've learned that independence works for me more in this faith journey. But yet I love hearing the different verses and different ideas. Right now we're working through the book of John, as a family, and did it in a great way of just saying a chapter a day. And so you have that freedom of when you want to do that in the day, and you don't even have to do it in that day. If for example, I was at dance nationals, and basically he said, we're just going to meet and discuss it before we leave for our next trip. And so I have that time and I have that window of when I want to do it. So that invitation is very nice, and that independence of feeling not pressured. I have to make sure I get my book done today. It's very nice. And so that works for us, but some families that doesn't work for.
Well, just to clarify, you said I did a nice job of how we're doing the book of John, but if you recall, I did a high challenge. It was a train wreck. It was, I don't even remember how exactly I said it, but I think I just said, kids, every day we're getting together on the table. We're going to read this. And it's the way it is to be. All of you went to mom to say, this isn't working. This isn't right. Mom came to me. And it was actually Holly had the great idea of think of a better way. They will be receptive if you come up with kind of a more creative way. So the creative way was, all right, fine. Chapter a day, read it on your own. And if you want, we'll meet on Saturday mornings for donuts and we'll talk about it.
Yep.
So, I think that's it just for all the listeners. And I'll tell clients this, some of the content I share in coaching sessions and even on these podcasts, when you go roll it out to your family, expect rolled eyes, expect some spiritual warfare against it, expect some resistance because it's a new thing. It's making them uncomfortable, but have the grace to yourself, the grace even to your loved ones that they are going to push back and then just recalibrate to kind of figure out what's the best way, the best path forward. We talk a lot about the 5 capitals in the house. I'll quiz you. Do you know the 5 capitals?
Oh, yes. So I can say them? Okay.
Yes.
Spiritual's first, then relational, then physical, then intellectual, then financial.
All right. Nice job. Sweet. That's good stuff. All right. I say that all the time to you, or we talk about it. How do you live it out? How does it affect your life?
Yeah, I think honestly, just knowing that financials last is important in everyone's life. Just knowing that needs to be the last priority. Of course, I get it. If you're the provider for the family, that it's going to be stressful and that is going to be a stress on you. But at the same time, you have to understand that the 4 other ones are much more important in the grand scheme of things. For like spiritual, for me, I needed to make sure that I understood that was even more important than relationships. And I needed to make sure that God's relationship with me was my highest priority. And I've gotten to the point where like now when I talk to him, I'll be like, dear God, but at the same time, like sometimes I'm just say like, hey dad, like I've gotten to that point where it's so easy for me to talk to him, which is so freeing. And I feel called to just to tell you guys that if you have that pressure, and there's a pressure with Jesus, and it's kind of like a very like old and traditional way that he's authority and like you have to be like on your hands and knees. And yes, that is a way to pray. But at the same time, you can also have that open feeling if that's more inviting to you of kind of any time. Like I'll just be like in bed before I go to sleep and I just need to talk to someone. And I'm like, hey, Daddy, if you're listening, like I know you heard my day after you saw it, but I'm going to tell you everything about it because I need to let it out. And that's so freeing. So having that for sure, having that kind of open conversation with him all the time is because I knew that spiritual was first. And then knowing that physical was also an important part, but yet not the most important part. I think that's very hard on some people just because they love, like they're like, shoot, I need to go to the gym. I need to do this and this. Okay, pause. Like, how is it looking in relationship wise? Have you talked to everyone? Have you talked to the family today? Have you hung out with anyone? Because that's not physical is not the most important part. So you have to make sure. But the 5 capitals are very important and have even impacted me. And I didn't think they would as much just because of my age.
Is there anything that you think parents need to know that you've not said yet in raising a teenager, trying to help them to grow in their faith, win at home first? Is there anything that you wanted to mention that you've not yet?
Yeah. So just for the parents out there, just remember that every kid that you have, they're going through something. They're going through life in general, which has its ups and downs. But just remember to just sit down with them and ask them one-on-one. No other like intentions behind it. Just saying, how are you? Like, how was your day? That's something that, my family does after school. That's how was your day? First question, not, hey, can you do this? Like, hey, make sure you get your homework done. Hey, you got to get to practice. It's how was your day? Like just having that first initiation of the conversation to let them know that you care will go such a long way.
That's great. I do have a further question on that because how was your day? A lot of times as a parent, you get the response, fine, okay, or one word answers. So back to this question, how do we get more depth out of that interaction?
I think instead of saying, how was your day? You ask them straight on, did you do anything fun today? Like what was new in school? And like, because I guess also from the kid's perspective, how was your day could be perceived as they have to ask this question. Like we just got picked up from school. They're gonna, like, they have to ask us how it was. They haven't seen us in 8 hours or whatever. But instead you could be like, did you guys like learn anything cool in school today? Did you guys do a new lab? How was recess? Stuff like that to make it more inviting for them to have a bigger answer would definitely be helpful.
And one thing, listening to you this whole episode so far, and as I've even taken notes as you talked, man, a big thing for you as a teenager, it's on your heart, is us parents asking questions to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a constant theme that you said that just makes me think that, one, sorry for the times I don't ask questions and I'm very directive. And so that's a little bit of a wake-up call for me to think about, because I know sometimes questions take time. Questions take too long, or you're going to have this long answer. I don't want to hear the answer. I don't have time for the answer. I've got to go to my next appointment, or I've got to go do this. But if I'm directive, well, it's over. I mean, it gets done. But everything you keep saying is all about questions, which take time, which take listening. But it's also where you build relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's so cool to hear you say that. And I didn't know that this would be the path that this took. Which also just makes me think, I mean, they talk about, Jesus all the time, that he asked more questions than really anything in all of his dialogue. And I love in John, where the very first words out of Jesus' mouth that John captures in that book is, what are you seeking? It's a question. And so what you're wanting out of us as parents is a little bit of what Jesus did. He just asked questions.
Yep.
And that's pretty cool. Anything in case a teenager listens to this that you want them to know?
Openness goes both ways. You can't expect the parent to be open when you have a shut wall or like a brick wall. They can't talk to a brick wall. So make sure you just break that down for them to instigate that openness.
It's a two-way street.
Yep.
That's awesome. Man, this is cool. And I didn't even go through all my questions, but that was a fun conversation. Thank you for taking the risk of being on here. And this is a little bit of imitation challenge. I invited you to be on the podcast, but at the same time, it's a challenge of you had to think about it. You had to not prepare, but think, pray through. I mean, I'm sure there was some preparation on your end too. So thank you for doing it. I already am confident that this will be a blessing to many people. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's awesome. You're welcome. What is your Instagram handle for any teenagers that are listening that, you know what, I want to follow Kiley?
It's Kiley.Carlson and then Kiley, Kiley.
Awesome.
Very easy.
Very easy. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for being an amazing daughter. And I can't wait to see what more God has in store for you.
Oh, thanks, Dad.
And I love you.
I love you too.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast, Win at Home First. I am so grateful to hear from listeners like you that this content has been helpful. So now I would love for you to pay it forward. I want to get this message in the hands of more listeners. We need leaders to be winning both at home and at work, especially during this time. So please take a minute to share this episode with somebody you think would find value in it, as well as rate and subscribe. As a thank you, please visit my website at coreycarlson.com to download a free resource that people are finding value in. Thank you very much.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.